Your career is a long game, and you should treat it as such. In this episode of the Civil Engineering Podcast, I have with me Michael O'Grady, Chief Growth Officer and Licensed Professional Engineer with Terracon. Michael's had a long and dynamic career with a lot of ebbs and flows, and in this episode, he's going to share some very specific things that he did in his career to embrace change and movement, and how you can take the same steps in your career. Before we jump in, a quick word from our sponsor, PPI, a Kaplan company.
PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the FE and PE exams the first time. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. Check out PPI today at ppi2pass.com to see all the options available for FE and PE exam prep. Now let's dive into today's episode.
All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the episode for today. Michael O'Grady is a licensed professional engineer, and he's the Chief Growth Officer at Terracon. Michael, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. Glad to be here.
So why don't you start off, Michael, by telling us a little bit about yourself and kind of your career journey, starting from, when you started your career up to becoming the Chief Growth Officer. Give us kind of your overview of your journey here.
Sure. Yeah. No, I sit in Kansas City now, but I'm actually originally from Texas, and so after I got out of college at the University of Texas, I actually started my career in Houston, and my background or my education was a combination of structural engineering coursework and geotechnical and materials classes, and so I was really the coursework I liked when I was in school was the structural. I thought that was very challenging and everything. And so when I first got out of college and I went to work for a big design firm in the Houston area and did that for a couple of years. And when I co-opted also when I was in college, I co-opted for a civil design firm. And that was a really great experience because it made me realize that, hey, I like this work and I like what I do. But the one thing, when I did co-op, I worked in the office, but I also worked out surveying. And then I think that's one thing that I always liked, the outdoors and being outside, and even what got me into engineering besides math. I also worked some construction when I was in high school. And so when I found myself in the office all the time doing the design work, I realized that I really wanted to be outside more. I wanted to be more engaged with the clients. And so I really looked for a different opportunity. And so I actually changed out of structural design and got into what the business I'm still in today, the geomaterials environmental consulting side of the engineering business. And so I've really been doing that and started out after being inside for the first couple of years of my career. It was getting outside, being around construction and geotechnical investigations, a lot of environmental type landfill work and all that. And so really liked that and got to work on a lot of really neat projects. And then what I liked about the consulting side of the engineering business, you got to interact with the clients directly. And I liked that side of it, was working with clients. And then I also found from that led to kind of that out in the consulting business, it's that seller-doer model. And so, hey,
right.
you find it and you find your own work and you bring it in and you execute it. And then that leads to building teams and having other engineers and scientists work with you on these projects. And I found that invigorating. And that gradually over time led to, from being a field engineer and then getting into heavy project management, that then led into business operations. And so I got into that line management. And we were always in a seller-doer business, and that intrigued me, and I did then start move more toward the business side, and then that progressed me up to, typical engineering firms. You're working at local offices, and then regions, and then you have divisions geographically dispersed, and so that's how I got into to line management, and then eventually senior management, and then about 24 years ago, I got approached by the company I'm with today, Terracon Consultants, and they were, at the time, about a $100 million company, but they really had what I thought was a great plan for growth, great plan for success. And so I actually stepped out of that traditional line management and came over to Terracon to really run a national service line for them, and which really focused more on strategy and growth. And so again, that took a different direction in my career. And this is where I've been for the last 24 years, and really have been much more on the strategy and growth side, and that whole concept of what got you here won't get you there, and how do you continue to change and evolve as a company? How do you add new services? And so that's kind of where I am today. And in my 24 years here, I've I originally took on that service line director role at a national level, and then we did go through some other, because we were growing so fast, I actually did take on a hat of operations management again, and kind of wore two hats for a while. But what the company's allowed me to do also is do some different strategic things. I also oversaw safety for a while, which I'd love to talk to you about that at some point.
Yeah, that's a big job. Yeah.
And then I was our chief development officer, which was really driving services and quality. How do we drive quality, and how do we expand our services? And then in that chief development officer role, I also had our business lines and our sectors. And again, now, about 2 years ago, we crossed the $1 billion mark. And so when I started, we were 100 million. Now we're $1 billion. And it's a big evolution. So you constantly have to change and evolve and tweak your structure and your organization to make sure you have an organization that can manage the growth and still be efficient and doesn't get bogged down with bureaucracy. And so 2 years ago, my role changed again into this chief growth officer role, and which is really focused on, again, the future. Where are we going? It's more of the longer game. Where are we going? How are we evolving? What markets do we want to be in? What are the clients we need to be serving? And then, as important, how do we innovate? And what are the future business models going to look like? So much of the engineering consulting business is we sell brains by the hour. And so, but is that going to be what it's going to look like in the future? And what do we need to be doing now to protect ourselves from that we're not going to be disrupted and obsolete at some point? And so that's a challenge we have. And so again, I love playing this longer game and looking at where we're going. Seth?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you've a lot to unpack there, and we'll go through it in the next some questions and stuff here. But really interesting, a lot of different opportunities for you and different things that you've seen, which is great. And we do an annual future of work trends report for the industry, and you just reminded me a little bit of that in terms of what we're looking at today. The whole industry, it may not look like that in the future. In fact, one of the things that kept coming up for us in this report was, when I came up as a consulting engineer, and I'm sure when you did, number of hours was a big deal, right? Like no one was leaving the office before a certain amount of time if you wanted to get to a certain part in the company. But that mindset has shifted a little bit now. And some of this next generation is really want to focus more on results, not necessarily hours. And so that's one trend that we're interested to see how that evolves. And I'm sure that's can be one of the things when you refer to trends and different things going on that people will be paying attention to. But just for our listeners, I know, Terracon is a very popular organization that a lot of people know, but just a couple of people, if they don't know about Terracon, can you just give them a little overview real quick on kind of how big you are and the type of services?
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to. Yeah, Terracon, it's been around since 1965. It was founded in Iowa in the Cedar Rapids area, and really started as a geotechnical engineering company. Jerry Olson was the founder, and he was the sole owner initially, but he was also a savvy business person as well, and he basically built a good team there in Iowa, and gradually they expanded throughout the Midwest, and the services kind of naturally carried over, which is, I think, a story for a lot of geotechnical firms. They start out in geotechnical engineering firms, and then things go to construction, and it's like, well, we need to monitor the construction. We need construction quality control, quality assurance. And so they added that service and materials testing, materials engineering. And then getting into the 70s with the whole addition of EPA and CERCLA and RECRA requirements, a lot of geotechnical firms branched into the environmental realm. And so for up through the 90s, that's what the company was. And it grew steadily, but was very successful. And then into the 90s, again, really as a result of the requirements of a lot of real estate transaction and bank requirements, there was a lot of phase one site assessments that had to go along with real estate transactions, and when they were selling real properties, real assets, the loans would require property condition assessments. And then so they did branch into the late 90s into the property condition assessment, which is today our fourth service line, which is our facilities engineering practice. So we have four key service lines. It's still what our core was: geotechnical engineering, which represents about 30% of the business, our construction materials engineering, QA/QC, and then construction inspection business, which represents about 40% of our business. And then our environmental services, which is about 25% of our revenue. And then lastly, our what is still our youngest practice is our facilities engineering, which is facility asset management, property condition assessments, building envelope, building enclosure, and MEP work that we do. And it's all really consulting. In that area, we can do a variety of consulting from assessment through actual design services as well. And we basically, as I said a little bit earlier, we crossed the $1 billion mark about 2 years ago. And so we're about 6,000 employees, and we have about 170 locations across the U.S. We're 100% in the U.S. We have done international work, but our offices are all based here in the U.S. And I will say another important fact: 100% employee owned as well. So that's one thing we're proud of. So that's give credit to Jerry Olson. He was the sole owner, and then he brought in some partners. And then basically in the 90s, they turned it into a 100% employee owned where all employees could buy stock. And right now we are about 52% individual shareholders. Anybody that's been here a year can buy stock. And then the other 48% is owned through our ESOP.
Wow. That's awesome. That's exciting.
Yep.
And I definitely want to dive a little bit into kind of career professional development with you here today, because it's obviously something that you just explained, like your progression. I think there's a lot, like I said, to unpack there. But a couple of things real quick is one is, you've had a lot of exciting opportunities in your career, that have been varied. Like you did technical work, you did project management work, you did some seller doer stuff, business development, operations, strategy now, et cetera. I know about 10 or 15 years ago or so, you achieved an MBA. And I'm interested to know, what was your decision-making process in deciding to get that, and how has that helped you in your career since then? Because we do get that question a lot from civil engineering professionals.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something I thought about, throughout my career. It was, even early on, when I was getting out of college, I actually had started grad school, but then there was some good career opportunities that I just wanted to jump on. I thought, I can always go to grad school later and everything like that. And so, I did. But then as, your family grows and you start having kids, there's a lot of priorities that you have to get out there and make sure you balance your life with your career. And so I always thought about going, I still wanted to get that master's and everything. But the more I thought about it, it was where my career was going. And it really hit me when I came to Terracon and got more into strategy, that, engineering, taking engineering in college, it doesn't allow you to take many electives and venture beyond the engineering core, other than a few outside electives that you can take. And so, as I was getting into that business side, I realized that and again, I was working around people just like me. They were all engineers and scientists and architects, and that we were very technical degree. There wasn't too many people that had business backgrounds outside of the people that were on our CFO and the people on the accounting side. But our CEO, David Gabriel, he went back, had an MBA and then gone to business school and everything. And that really intrigued me when I'm talking to him about it. He didn't push me one way or the other, but just listening to him, I think that need for the people around the table having a broad knowledge and a knowledge beyond just the engineering and the scientists, I think was critical. And at that, since we were really going through a high growth period, we were getting into mergers and acquisitions. I was involved in strategic planning. I felt I needed a lot more understanding of the business aspects. And the funny thing that happened when I took my MBA, there was the accounting and finance courses, which was exciting because it's numbers just like engineering and you get to play with that stuff. And then there was the strategy side, which I thought was great as well. But what surprised me was I think was the key part of the MBA for me that I thought was the most rewarding, and I still use a lot of it today. It's one, there was a real focus on, it's probably an overused term, but cohort groups, but it's really about collaboration. And how do you work with people from, that come from the various backgrounds? And I'm working with people that came out of in my MBA, they're out of the healthcare market. There's only one other individual in my program that was out of the engineering business, but they came from a lot of fields. Bringing those folks together and working with them, that was a large part of the program, was working together as a team and solving problems and presenting together. So I learned a lot out of that. And then the other side was this self-awareness and self-development and, emotional intelligence side. They went a lot into that, which I probably would have scoffed at it initially, because of being such a technical person and just driving forward. But it opened my eyes a lot to the softer side of strategy, the softer side of leading people. And that, I think, in the end, I learned some business skills, but that part, this understanding the collaboration, the self-awareness and emotional intelligence you went through and how to build teams and how to lead, I think that was the most beneficial thing I got out of the program.
That's great. And what I really like about what you said is that you had a conversation with someone that had previously gotten it, right? I think that's a really good approach in one's career. If you're thinking about getting a certification or a license or a degree that you're going to have to invest, time, energy, money, it's good to talk to a couple of people if you can that have gone through that process. And if they have any kind of success rate at this point, if it was 2 years ago for them, they could tell you, hey, it's been a big help for me in my career over the last few years, and it could just be really beneficial to help you make that decision. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I've since had people talk to me about it and everything. And I always tell them, it's like anything, was I pleased? Did I think 100% of the coursework was worthwhile? No, it's just like you can go back to your days in college when you were doing your undergraduate and other graduate degrees. And you look at it and you go, well, I don't know how much I got out of that program, but I had to take it. It was a requirement and everything like that. But I really felt, as with anything, you get out what you put in. And I just, like I said, I still feel if I had to put a percentage on it, I'd say, 70% of things that I learned through my MBA, I've been able to take out and apply in some way in my career since that time. That's great. So I want to talk a little bit about career moves. You mentioned something also earlier that I think was really good to think about in terms of, when you were coming to Terracon, you mentioned, understanding their strategy and their business strategy and their business plan, which really excited you, kind of knowing, what they were planning to do. And I think that can be important whether you're trying to go to a new firm or just even make a move within your own firm or as you grow in your own firm, like understanding what their plan is. And I wanted to ask you about, making a lateral move in one's career, because I know you had experience with that. Is that something that can be a real stepping stone for someone if you're just moving laterally?
Oh, I talk about that a lot with folks. Being a little further along in my career than some of the folks I work with, I do get to talk to people, and I think so many of us, and I'm guilty of it too. But we're, engineers, scientists are very linear thinkers, and they're just moving on, and so sometimes they apply that to their career as well, and this natural progression. I'm a field engineer, a staff engineer, a project engineer, a senior engineer, a program manager, project manager, whatever. Or, hey, I'm a local office manager, a regional manager, a division. And so it's that natural progression. And so people get myopic about it. And the reality is that sometimes I try to tell folks your career it's a winding road, Yeah. And I think lateral moves are a critical part of that. And it's about growing your career. People might argue, well, I don't want to be a mile wide and inch deep. But then the other side of that is true, right? You don't want to be an inch wide and a mile deep and everything. It's leadership and growth is about broad experiences. And so I think the biggest, I think I've got to give you several examples, but I think I mentioned safety earlier. I mean, going back in 2010, we were growing, and any growth company, you wear two hats. And so when I came here, I came as the service line director for our national materials engineering practice. And then about 5 years in, we restructured because of the growth. And so I was what we called an operating group manager. That's we have major geographic regions. Today we're broken into 3 of those. And we have like COOs that are called operating group managers in each of those. So back in 2005 through 2010, that was another hat. I had 2 hats on as we were going through this growth. But then again, our CEO came to me and tapped me on the shoulder, and we really had a problem with safety at the company. And David asked me, he said, I really need somebody to take this on. And the idea was, hey, safety, everybody thinks safety is about the safety director in the corner, and then he's the safety or she's the safety director, and that's the person guiding safety. And we were trying to make sure people understood safety has to be owned by the people out in operations, and this is about keeping us all safe. It's not somebody that sits up at the corporate office. But he felt he needed somebody from operations to give it credibility. This was the direction we're going. And so I had to, make a decision to step out of that comfort zone I was in as an operating group manager and take on safety. And so, that was a lateral move. And I think that lateral move, saying, why has it been important for my career? Well, first and foremost, it's been extremely rewarding because, yes, first and foremost, it was about safety. We, in my opinion, were very reactive to safety. People were getting hurt. Fortunately, at the time, we weren't killing anybody. Nobody was dying, but people were getting injured, and that's not good. And so when I delved into it, I realized that what we were really trying to do wasn't to roll out some new safety program and have some new rules and guidelines, but it was really about how do we change the culture of the company around safety? How do we lead with care and concern, and that we want everybody to go home safe every day? That's what it was about first and foremost. But then, and this is what you learn from people you work with, our CEO, David Gabriel at the time, had the brilliance of what he was trying to do was we needed to get safer as a company. We had that responsibility. It wasn't just, we had to change our culture of saying, hey, I care about you, Anthony. Good luck out there. Be safe, and it's your personal responsibility to stay safe. We wanted to change the culture, saying, no, we're going to look out for each other. Anthony's going to look after me, and I'm going to look after Anthony, and we would grow that culture. And what David saw, and again, this is about learning from your peers, was that we could apply this in so many ways to change management and how we change the company in other areas. Now, safety maybe was a little easier because it truly was life and death, right? People didn't do things right; they could lose their lives. But the concepts that I learned and we learned as a company about driving change, changing culture, I'm very proud of what we did. And even today, we do annual employee engagement surveys. It's the most highly ranked thing we do as a company for what they love about Terracon, why they enjoy working here, and that's great. And I'm so proud of that. But the principles about driving change at a company, we've been able to take and learn from that and apply it to other things that we need to use to drive change at the company. And so taking that lateral move exposed me to a whole different area of understanding the business and how to drive change in the business, and that I wouldn't have gotten if I hadn't made that lateral move over.
That's interesting. Yeah, and that's something that there are a lot of opportunities like that available in our industry for those engineers listening. For example, at EMI, we do a lot of work with firms where we'll build like a custom project management program. So we really roll our sleeves up and we get in with the firm and we design a program. And a lot of times we'll be working with someone like yourself who says, well, I'm an engineer by background, but I've been thrust into like director of project management for our firm, right? Similar to what happened to you with safety. And so I think it's important to let people know that there are other opportunities. Like if you love engineering, you could do engineering your whole career. But if you like engineering, but you want to do strategy or growth or get involved in safety or project management, as your firm grows, there's going to be doors that are going to open. And like, the perfect example that Michael just gave us, I'm sure that safety position and that whole experience was something that obviously you've remembered throughout your career. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's been some of the best experiences. And I think you said it well. This isn't about, hey, I'm going to do these things. I'll only do that if I want to get into management or leadership or running the business. I just want to be an engineer. Well, it still applies to leading engineers, because as you progress your career, you want to do more challenging projects. And so you're going to have more engineers working for you on projects, and understanding and having a diverse background so you can manage those people, and you have a diversity of problems you've encountered along the way,
it's going to help you in being a better engineer or a better scientist as well, and leading technical teams, not just business teams. So
yeah, that kind of goes back to what you said too about the MBA. You took away a lot of like people leadership, right? The IQ management, the EQ. So Michael, you talked a little bit about change and kind of dealing with change and navigating change. I'm wondering if you can share any lessons that you learned through some of the change that you've experienced either in your career or as a firm. Like, for example, you had to make a culture change when it came to safety, right? So that's a huge endeavor. So we had COVID we dealt with where people had to be remote a lot more and do different things. So I'm just wondering if you have a couple of things that you've taken away from change that you've gone through that has helped you navigate it or helped Terracon navigate it that you could share with us.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, you using that safety example, I think, you think about what's your burning platform, and it was again, I think I mentioned it earlier with safety, it's easy to put safety out there again, because this is people's lives at stake and we're responsible for each other. But when it comes to change, how do you frame the importance? What's the why behind it? And I think that's critical. And then you also have to frame what's in it for me, meaning the folks out there in operations that you're asking to change and be a part of this. And so it's critical to make sure you've done that and you've established the why. And the other thing about leadership, it's not about you coming up with all the best ideas. It's bringing the right people in to create that strategy, define the why, and talk about how do we communicate this to the masses, and how do we get all get on the same page so that when we take it out of operations, there's a consistent message. And then we as leaders, it's critical for us to understand this is a long game, and we're not going to win tomorrow. This takes time. And so you do need to look for opportunities when you're driving change to have small victories and celebrate those victories and recognize and share those stories so that people can see the progress you're making. And then also recognize where you're failing and where you might have gaps. And again, don't be afraid to admit those challenges and pivot in certain areas or change. Because I think people will see through it if you just keep pushing through and aren't self-aware of hey, problems this change might be creating and what can you do? And then how do you gather feedback? How do you have a feedback loop through all of this change so that you're listening to the folks that have to live this every day? I think those are some critical points that you have to have.
Yeah, I think that's so important when you're hitting on like understanding the why behind something. I mean, of course, from a safety perspective, you want it to have less accidents and less injuries, but that's the end result. You have to figure out why these things are happening and how can we truly change them. Like you said earlier, it was like more of a culture thing, and the way that it was communicated really had to change. And obviously across a large organization, it's a long game, like you said, and it's something that you got to take action on every day. I think that's really a good lesson, just generally speaking, for someone in their career, right? Like your career is a long game, right? And we've talked about this a few times today. A lateral move may in the moment feel like, oh, do I really want to do this? But over the long haul, you're going to learn a lot. It's a new experience. You're going to meet new people. Good things can happen. And I think the same thing goes like just with goals, like in general. Like we set goals here at EMI. We have our strategic goals for the company, but then we try to look at those strategic goals, and then we set like quarterly goals, like for the teams, right? That have to line up with those. And then individuals on the team will have goals that they're working on every day. So it's all about like understanding that you want to have a plan, you want to know where you're headed, and then you have to figure out how you're going to bring it down to today. And I think all of that is kind of predicated on that why that you talked about, that you have to get right from the beginning. Because if you don't get that right, like there could just be a lot of loss of engagement from people because they're just doing things to do things, but it's not connected to something that's more important. Yeah, no, that's, and something you said there, that's such a critical point about the goal setting. And I look at, what we do here is, we, every 5 to 6 years, we put together a new strategic plan and setting the goal, what's our direction for the next 5 to 6 years. And I've been other places where, everybody does a strategic plan, and then it goes on the shelf until it's time to dust it off and do the next one. And it almost becomes a running joke in some places.
that you didn't use it and everything. I think that's one thing that has been significant at driving Terracon success is it's a living document. We constantly use that strategic plan. That strategic plan is our long-term roadmap and everything. But to your point on the goals, it can be overwhelming. You look at that strategic plan and going, man, how are we going to accomplish all this in the next 5 years? And it goes back to the old, how do you eat the elephant, right? You eat it one bite at a time, right?
Right.
And so how do you break down that 5 to 6 year plan into 1 year business plans? And that's what we do here. It's like, okay, what do we want to accomplish this year? What do we want to bite off? And let's set this in our business plan for this year. And to your point, Anthony, setting goals and what are the leading indicators and the lagging indicators? We got that from there's a Covey book, 4 Disciplines of Execution. What are the key leading indicators and lagging indicators that we can measure to show that we're on track, to your point, and we're going to check in, whether that's monthly or quarterly or whatever. But at the end of the day, those measures are telling us something, and those measures might tell us we've got the wrong measures, right?
Yeah.
Or we're doing something wrong. That's the tough part sometimes. Do you have the wrong KPIs, or are you doing something wrong in your execution? And that takes a group effort and some honesty to look at it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I won't get into it now, but for those of you who have goals, like having those leading and lagging indicators is important. So for example, just a quick example, if a company has a quarterly sales goal of $1 million in revenue, that's going to be a lagging indicator, right? Like at the end of the quarter, you're going to know if you hit that or not. The problem is you don't want to wait till the end of the quarter. You want to have some leading indicators like sales calls, proposals sent out every week or every month or whatever it is.
Beautiful.
And so if you think about it in your own life, hey, I want to go to the gym. Okay, what does that mean? Do you want your weight's going to get stronger? Like, what are you going to be doing to measure that? You can't just say, I want to go to the gym. So it's a good thing to think about personally as well in your career when you're setting your goals. Okay, yeah, you want to get your PE license. Great. That's a great lagging indicator. You're going to get it or you're not. But how do you know if you're on track to get it? Did you sign up for a course? Did you do a couple chapters or whatever the case may be? So that's a really important lesson. Obviously, we could probably do a whole episode on that, but I just want to mention a couple of examples because it is something that could be a bit of a game changer here. So, all right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with Michael, and we're going to finish up by asking him a couple of more career questions on our civil engineering hot seat. We'll be right back. All right. We are back with our guests for today. Michael O'Grady is a licensed professional engineer, chief growth officer at Terracon. We've talked a lot about how your career is a long game. We talked about strategy. We've talked about change. Now we're going to pepper Michael with a couple of last questions here on our civil engineering career hot seat. All right, Michael, you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Do you have any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, maybe a morning routine or a lunchtime routine, or just something that you do consistently on a daily basis that has contributed to your success?
Yeah. I mean, I think I can, like all of us, I think I could be a little overly critical of myself, but I try to take stock every day in what I'm thankful for. My wife, my family. Now I've got some grandkids that are just wonderful. So I appreciate how fortunate I am. I think I'm a huge sports fan, and every year the Jimmy V Foundation, they always replay the Jim Valvano thing, and so I always took stock in something. It was obviously a very sad moment, but it was also a very uplifting moment when he gave that speech at the ESPN Awards. But when he told you to do 3 things, and he talked about to laugh, to think, and to cry, and I just think, man, work can be stressful, and you've got to find time to laugh, and I do like to have a good time and joke about things and try to create levity in stressful situations. I think that helps people relax. I think you do have to take time to think and reflect. I mean, you get so caught up in the moment, you got to step aside and think. And unfortunately, with Jimmy V, I don't know. I can't tell you I cry every day. I mean, maybe I should, but I think from just that standpoint of being thankful and happy and finding a place, you got to be a positive in this light. I think it's important from a leadership standpoint to set the right tone and to be able to inspire people. And if they feed off of the energy of the people around them and the leadership. And so I think those are all, important to me. I mean, yeah, I can throw in, I do try to, I've gotten into rowing. I got into rowing machine. So I do those things, and I'm a big list maker as well. At the beginning of the week, I try to make the list of, hey, what do I want to accomplish this week? And those are good things to do. But I think the other stuff's more important. Just taking stock in what you're thankful for and being positive. It rubs off on the people around you.
Yeah, that's great. The Jimmy V story is great. And if you have ever seen any of the ESPN 30 for 30s, you got to watch the one, I think it's called Survive in Advance, of their run to the championship. Like, what he did with that team was amazing, and then his whole story. So that's very, very inspiring. All right, Michael, has there been either a book or an author or a philosophy, you kind of just gave us one, but anything that you've kind of leaned on throughout your career that you came in contact with that stuck with you, that you've tried to utilize in your career?
You know, I think I'll give you two. I know it's funny. I know. I do like to read. I like to read to escape. I do like good history and biographies and everything. But from the business standpoint, you know, I do some business books can be sleepers from that standpoint. I do like to listen to them on tape. But there's two that have stuck with me. I guess one early in my career and one later in my career, and I think the one that was early in my career was Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and
yep.
I think I think it did help me early on, thinking about, you know, some of the things, you know, the whole, you know, begin with the end in mind, you know, think win-win. I mean, those are all critical, and it's so much about teamwork in there, having empathy for others as well.
It's timeless stuff.
And the funny thing is, I mean, we put together within Terracon a kind of the senior project management training program, and we've incorporated those principles from Covey. So I thought it was, you know, when our employee development team, when they were putting it together, and I went ahead and went through the program so I could see what it was like for our people and everything. And that was the first thing I saw. I said, boy, I remember these, you know, and so it was good stuff. So like you said, it was timeless. And the one that's more recent, and I read this, going back to the MBA discussion, I read this when I was doing my MBA, and it was the Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. And that's important. I think that's an important book to read because it talks about disruption and how your business can get disrupted. And it talks about businesses that were at the peak and at height and dominated their markets that don't exist today. And it was because they were disrupted. And so I've taken that over to understanding how we need to drive innovation, and how do we how can we be the disruptor as opposed to being the victim of the disruption. And so I would highly recommend the Innovator's Dilemma to anyone.
Great. That's great. I read a lot. I haven't heard of that one. I got to check that out. That's like all the taxi drivers in New York City that paid for their licenses, and then Uber came along.
Oh, great examples.
Right, their life savings that they put into getting a taxi license, and then this all of a sudden everyone can put a Uber thing on their car and start driving people around. But
great example.
So just thinking back to some of your managers over your career, we're just curious, and you don't have to name names, but if you think of your favorite manager or managers, what made him your favorite? We're just trying to understand, like, what are some of the drivers of really good managers and leaders in the civil engineering world, in your opinion?
Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, there's three I've had some great leaders and managers I've worked with. I think the three in particular that had very similar traits, beyond just being good leaders and being intelligent and everything, but it was really that took an interest in me in my career growth. I mean, they showed empathy, and they also, I think, from the standpoint of taking risks, and that learning from them, and it's not about being wild and crazy and just putting the company at risk, but understanding how to take measured risk and doing your homework and not getting into the analysis paralysis side, and then stepping off that and taking that first step toward that. I learned that, and I think that's critical, because I think, again, from the managers, from engineers and scientists standpoint, we can overanalyze things sometimes, and I think it's important to learn from others how to take risks and how to take measured risks. And, you don't want to put your company, in jeopardy, but from that standpoint, but how do you bring the right people in to understand that risk and then make the decision to go forward? Those are all things that I've been able to learn from, I think, the three people in it's really my two CEOs that I've worked with here at Terracon, and then one of my early bosses when I was down in Texas. I saw all of them do that, and it helped me learn and helped me understand how to analyze risk and measure risk, and then inspire people to take those risks.
That's great. That's awesome. All right, last question I have for you. We call it the civil engineering career elevator advice question. If you were to get into an elevator with a civil engineering professional, they're up and coming in their career, you only have about 30 to 40 seconds to give them some career advice. What would you say to them in that very short period of time?
I'd say look for opportunities to stretch and to get outside your comfort zone. I'll say the one thing I did, I was very comfortable down in Texas, could have been there today, but I took an opportunity and to move out of the market I was in and been in my whole career, and went up to Seattle and really worked with people I didn't know in a market I wasn't familiar with. But what it taught me, taking that risk and broadening that experience, it gave me the self-confidence that, hey, the things that I've learned, the things that people have mentored me with, and that it applies, you can take it with you, and it shows you what you've learned and how you can apply it. And hey, if you make mistakes, how to adjust from those mistakes. And so if you stay in your comfort zone, again, that's great, and some people might want to do that. But I think if you really want to broaden your experiences and broaden your abilities and broaden your ability to lead, you have to find ways to stretch yourself, broaden your mind, broaden your skill set, sharpen your saw. So
yeah, there you go. Yeah, back to the Kobe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Michael, you've given us some great time today and a lot of good advice. We really appreciate you spending some time with us here. And I think a big takeaway here is your career is a long game. Right? There's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows in it, but every decision matters, and you can learn from every opportunity. If it's a lateral opportunity, if it's a relocation, you didn't think that was going to happen to you. And it seems like those are have been some kind of like rich experiences for you in your career. And we appreciate some time here on the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Great, Anthony. Thanks for having me, and hopefully it'll be beneficial to others. So
thanks so much, Michael. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Michael. He really gave us a lot of good things to think about in terms of making steps, taking decisions the right way, and really just, even if it's a lateral move, right, how to embrace it in one's career. Please remember that you can find the show notes for this episode at civilengineeringpodcast.com, and there you will find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during the episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your civil engineering career endeavors.